let's talk about the schedule of this project. You've got all of your permits. You've done all of your architectural design board work. You are ready to roll on this project. This 6-unit building, the 6,000 feet of finished space, what kind of time frame should we expect each of these phases to take? Well, it's a really difficult question because the level of detail certainly has a lot to do with how long each section takes. But I'm going to give you a very rough overview working backwards from a finished project. The type of 6-unit that I've described with the kinds of quality that I would employ from the day you start bulldozing that house, that crappy little teardown that's on there, scraping your site, putting up your job site fence, bringing on your construction trailer, your work shack, your Santa can, and start the whole excavation process for your foundation. From the day you start to the day you are ready to hand a new tenant some keys should be no more, absolutely no more than 9 months on a 6-unit project. Now, that time frame is going to extend a little for more units, but not much. It's not like if you're building 12 units, it takes 18 months. No. If you built 12 units, it might take 10 or 11 months. The idea is that what each phase takes about the same amount of time. You just bring on more people to work in each of those phases. In other words, if you've got a real small little project, like say a duplex, you might just bring on one electrician that's going to do every bit of electrical work all by himself in 2 units. But if you're building 24 units, you're not going to have one electrician there. You're going to have a company that's got 10 electricians and they're all going strong. So the same time frame, maybe a little longer for the bigger project, applies. There should never be anything you would ever build that's under 40 units that would take you more than a year to build, start to finish, ever. 9 months to a year pretty much builds any size project. You just need to upsize your subs. Now, this is production construction. I want you to understand, this is not Oz and custom construction. When you get into Oz and custom construction, the sky's the limit. Hell, I could tell you stories in that department, but I'd rather not. My wife would really rather not tell you how long certain things have taken. But when you get into real custom construction, there is no time frame. You might spend months doing something very, very simple in terms of overall production, but it's a piece of art. You know, you could spend 8 months building a railing for a little tiny deck, but it's all out of woven copper and brass. You see what I'm saying? It's more art than it is construction. What I'm talking about here is production construction. And production construction, I've built a lot of buildings. The least amount of time that these type buildings take is 7 to 8 months. The most anything you'll ever build should take is about a year. And so we need to move this site right along. More important than the time frame of the job site is the sequence of things. That I've given this building to you in the sequence that you can expect to proceed with. And not that certain things aren't being done at the same time, but as you get more experience, you'll learn what things can be done at the same time and what things just cause more work if they're being done at the same time. Your construction financing follows the progress of this job site. Now, of course, assuming that you're not just building this out of pocket, and assuming that you haven't just been given the amount of money you need to build this by a private investor, if you're getting institutional construction financing, your draw for that particular piece of the construction loan will only happen with a corresponding progress on the job site. Okay? So you're going to lay out the total cost of this project. You're going to say, okay, this sixplex, I'm going to take out a $900,000 loan to build this sixplex. And that loan is going to be the total loan, but you're only going to be given that loan money as the project improves and moves towards completion. Okay, so this leads to a hilarious story. At least I think it was hilarious, and it is a true story. My first 4 duplexes that I built all by myself when I was a kid, I was very proud of because I was doing all the work myself. And I got a $60,000 loan for every duplex I built, which now sounds just, you can hardly buy a car for $60,000. Anyway, I am making progress on my first building. I'm working my brains out. I clear the entire site. I do all my underground work. I get all my storm in, all my sewer, all my conduits, rough grade. I mean, I'm running the loader. I'm running the cat. I'm running the backhoe. I dig the hole for my first foundation. I build my foundation, and I get the framing up of this first duplex. I've got the framing. I've got the sheeting on. I've got my windows set. My trusses are mostly set, and I get all of that done in the first month of this project. It was a heck of a busy month, right? By myself. So I go in and I submit my construction draw request. And so I had nothing built into my loan that had to do with overall land clearing. That was kind of on me. But I certainly had money built in for sewer connection, storm sewer connection, foundation, framing, right? The way a draw request works is that you submit your request and you say, okay, I got my sewer connection done, my storm sewer connection, my foundation is done, my framing is done, and that's what I submitted. And so I submitted a $20,000 or $15,000 estimate based on a line item drawing of when I get this done, I get this much, okay? And so then the bank, when they get your request, they send out an inspector to the site to just ensure that you've actually done what you said you were doing. And so I saw this guy drive up, and he got out of his car for about 2 minutes, looked around, got in his car and left and checked a few things off of a sheet. And so I called the bank on the 10th of the month, which is when I needed to pay my bills to get my supplier discounts, my concrete supplier discount, my framing lumber supplier discount. I wanted those discounts. I was counting on those discounts. If you pay by the 10th, you get a discount to a lot of suppliers. And the banker says, yep, you bet. Your check's already here. Do you want to come pick it up? I said, I'll be there by 6. You're open till 6. I'll be there by 6 to pick it up. And so I went to pick up my check, and the check was ready right there at the counter. Now, I'm a young kid, right? I've been working my brains out 7 days a week. I pick up my check, and I think my submittal was $15,000. I pick up my check, and it was only like $7,000. And I went, what in the world? This isn't right. And so I told the front desk I needed to speak with the banker. They were on the phone, this, that, blah, blah, blah. I had to wait around. And finally, this banker had time for me. I'll never forget her in my life. I walk in and I said, this draw request isn't right. I asked for $15,000. I got $15,000 worth of work done. Here's our draw request. She says, well, the inspector went out there and evidently he's not giving you credit for something because it wasn't done. I said, well, I'm giving you an honest draw request. Where is the paperwork on this? What is he saying I didn't get done? And she pulled the file and she says, well, it looks like he gave you money for a sewer hookup. He gave you money for a storm sewer hookup. And he gave you all the money for your framing. And so I guess that's all that's done. And I said, oh, well, there's the problem. I also submitted, of course, for my foundation. And she says, here's the sheet. He didn't check off that your foundation was done. And I looked at her like, are you joking with me? I said, no, wait a minute. You are giving me money for the framing, but you're not acknowledging that my foundation must be done? Well, it doesn't say it's done. I can only go by the checklist. He's the inspector. He was out there. I said, wait a minute. You're giving me money for framing. What do you think, my framing is sitting on the dirt? Or do you think maybe my framing is sitting on a foundation? I mean, can't we just assume there's a foundation there if my framing is done? No, I don't assume anything. I said, oh, that's ridiculous. I said, I want my money. I'm not leaving till I get it. That's insane. Call the inspector. She wouldn't do anything. She wouldn't do anything. That was the bottom line. Sorry. He'll look at it next month. Well, that doesn't pay my bills this month, and I'm really upset. And so I told her that I was going to give her 30 seconds to change her mind, or I was going to flip her desk over, and that she'd better roll back away from her desk. She had about 5 feet of paperwork stacked up on the messiest desk I've ever seen in my life. And all I could think to do that would really damage her afternoon was to flip her desk over. And I started counting down from 30. And at about 5, she rolls away from her desk and starts yelling for security. And at 0, I picked up this 7-foot wide desk and flipped it over, and all her drawers fell out, and about 18,000 pieces of paper spread everywhere across the floor. And everybody in this bank heard this huge crash in the corner. There was a bit of a scene, but I finally got the president of the bank over there to ask me, what is going on? And I explained it, and he turned right to her and said, you're kidding me, right? You're giving him money for his framing, but you won't give him the money for his foundation? And I looked right at her, and she said, but it wasn't checked on the inspector checklist. I didn't know how it was done. Eunice, what are you thinking, for crying out loud? And the guy gave me my money, apologized, and I walked out of there without getting arrested or in trouble. Nowadays, do not do this at home, by the way. Flipping people's desks over can really piss people off, and you could spend some time in jail for that. Don't do that. But I didn't have any other way to pay my bills, and I wanted to pay them on time. Okay, so the construction draw process proceeds as you proceed. And you're not going to be able to submit for a draw of something that isn't done. They send out inspectors and look at it, right? However, there is some creativity that you can apply to the draw request form, meaning that you can put reasonable payback items on certain line requests the way you would like to see the money coming to you. In other words, you can put a draw request that pays you back for the money you've spent for architecture, the money you've spent for permits, the money you have spent in landscape design and architecture and engineering. All of those soft costs you could put as draw item number 1. Because you've spent all that money personally, because you're not going to get a construction loan without a permit. So you've had to spend all of that money already. So maybe line item draw request number 1 pays you back out of borrowed funds for all of that you've already done. You also can kind of load the construction draw request any way you want. You might want to put a little bit more money towards excavation and foundation if you need to pay yourself back for other costs up front. Now, I don't suggest being ridiculous with this because you're going to need appropriate funds throughout the course of the project, but they're going to allow you to associate totals to each item along the way as long as it's reasonable, okay? When you are all done with this project, you're not going to be able to get permanent financing on this project without providing a certificate of occupancy. A certificate of occupancy means that you've got your final inspections from the city and they've given you the okay to have somebody actually live there. Now, along the way in this process, you're going to have several inspections, which brings up the whole topic of how do you treat the city officials that come out to your site and inspect your project. The first thing I can tell you is that every city official appreciates a nice, neat, tidy, well-organized job site. The fences, the signs, all of that, that's as much for them as it is for you. It shows them that you're trying to create a real professional situation here. And when you look professional at your entry gate, they're going to assume that the setting up of the steel in your footing is probably pretty correct. If you run a sloppy-looking job site, every single thing that you need inspected is going to be looked at with very scrutinizing eyes. If you can provide a professional-looking site, they're going to be a lot easier on you. Second thing is get to know these people. Get to know them personally. If you're not the one on site when the inspector comes, make sure your superintendent gets to know these people personally. What are their hobbies? What do they like to do on weekends? So that when they show up, the first question isn't about construction. It's about, hey, Dan, how was your weekend? Did you get out on the golf course? Any little warming up you can do to these guys is going to help you, because the fact of the matter is an inspector can find something wrong with any project that's ever been built on the planet. If they want to find something that doesn't meet code, believe me, they're going to find it. The code book is about 4 inches thick, and there's always something they can cite. So you're wanting to be friendly with these guys. Don't piss them off. Don't go head-to-head with them. Never argue with them. Just try to be friendly, be compliant. If they have suggestions, thank them for the suggestion and just do what they need you to do, because if you can get on their good side, it's going to make your process a lot simpler. You're going to need them first and foremost in checking for your footing pour. They're going to check the bearing soil underneath that footing, and they're also going to check the steel in that footing pour, that it's built per the design that they've approved. Then you're going to have to check your wall steel. If you're doing a 2-pour, they're going to check your wall steel. Okay? The third thing they're going to check is your overall framing of the building. And then here come the independent inspectors who check plumbing, electrical, HVAC. Those things are checked separately than your building inspector checking the framing. Now, sometimes a building inspector will also be a plumbing inspector. More often than not, a plumbing inspector is a separate guy, an electrical inspector is a separate person, an HVAC is a separate person, and then your building inspector checks foundation and framing. Then you're going to have an insulation inspection. Once you're ready to cover, you're going to get approval to cover. Then you can do your insulation. Then you need an insulation inspection. Then you're able to sheetrock. Then you're going to need a nailing inspection on your sheetrock before you can tape. Then once you're through that nailing inspection on the sheetrock, your next inspection is the final. Now in the final, they're going to make sure that all of your smoke detectors are correct, all of your railings are up, all of your life safety items are handled. Now, some projects that you're going to want to build in certain cities and areas are going to require a fire sprinkler system throughout the project. And it has to do with the city that you build in. I've built 4-plexes in Seattle where I had to sprinkle the whole building. I've built 20 units in Edmonds, which is 20 minutes away, that I don't have to sprinkle the building. So it has to do with each agency's codes. So you're going to have to, obviously, in your permit stage, understand what you need to do. But mostly safety items are what comes into the final inspection. All of the items that have anything to do with occupancy safety. Then, more than likely, you're going to have to post in that city or county landscape maintenance bonds. Really? So that the landscape plan that's been approved, that you install it, you put it in there, and now you're posting bonds that say you'll keep it alive and flourishing for 3 to 5 years, so that once it's stayed alive and flourished for 3 to 5 years, then they'll give you or release your bond money or not require that you renew it. But they want to have some leverage that says you don't just plant something and it's dead in 6 months. More than likely, in your landscape plan, you're going to be required to irrigate your landscape plan. And not a real big deal here, except in your irrigation, make sure that you apply for a special permit, which is a backflow prevention device. And that backflow prevention device is going to have to be inspected annually. What that does is it keeps the sprinkler water that's laying in your sprinkler system throughout the year from backflowing into the main water supply system, into the potable water. They want water going one way, from the main line out. They don't want to risk that any water backflows into the potable water system. So they're going to make you have a backflow prevention device and test that it's working annually. Make sure that in the winter of this, kind of falls under property management, maintenance, and we've covered this, but I'll say it again. Make sure you blow all of those sprinkler systems in the winter clear of all water so that freezing pipes don't break here, there, and everywhere and cause a mess. Just blow the system clean in the winter and fire it up again in the spring. Okay? All right, let's talk about elevators for a second. The building that we're building, we haven't really addressed what type, if it's a townhouse unit or flats. But I want to address the issue of elevator by really addressing the market for that particular condominium. Now, there are certain areas that I could build a condominium, certain locations where my market is a very young, yuppie, hip, 30-year-old single or couples. No elevator necessary. A few stairs, no big deal. Then there are other areas within a half an hour radius of each other where I would build condominiums, and the entire market for that condominium are retired people over 65. That particular condominium will not sell if somebody has to walk a flight of stairs up to get into their unit. Or townhouse units, where the unit itself has multiple levels. They will have a tough time selling without an elevator in that building. And so if you need to put an elevator in, you've got to do your research about cost of elevator. And they're like plumbing fixtures. They're all over the board. You can put in a real cheap little personal one-person elevator system up to the full-on Otis system that'll handle, 20 people. So you're going to make decisions based on cost. What I'm telling you is that your market is going to determine whether you need an elevator or not. We've talked a little bit about landscape and landscape design. And again, this is where you're going to get a professional involved. They really know how to create some real emotion in landscaping. One of the things you're going to want to spend a few bucks on is landscape lighting. It is, over the scope of things, very cheap to put some landscape lighting in, but makes a huge impact as somebody looks at this building, be it as a rental or as a purchase at night. Huge emotional impact. So it's money well spent. I can tell you that on the many long list of peeves I have is cheap-ass landscape lighting. The cheap plastic stuff that just falls apart in a matter of minutes. Sleeve conduit to underground to where these landscape lights are going to be. Run your power through conduit in the ground. Don't just direct bury cords everywhere in your landscape bed. One dog gets on a run and digs up all your cords, chews them all up. It's just ridiculous. Run conduit underground, put it 18 inches underground, stub up where every light is going to be, put a base to that light. You might even down deep on the riser, put a little bit of concrete around there to hold it nice, straight, and in place, and then put a decent landscape light, a nice brass fixture. You're going to spend a few bucks on the actual light itself, but you're not going to spend a lot of money at all on the conduit and wire running through the conduit. Landscape lighting is a must. Walkway lighting. Landscape lighting, can become your walkway lighting. And it provides not only some great ambiance, but it provides a lot of safety as well. People moving through concrete pathways, coming out their front door, heading from here to there. Light it up. Make it look good. Driveway choices. Wow. There's really 3 choices. Asphalt, cheap, down and dirty. It'll get the job done. If you put asphalt down, spend the little bit of extra time and money to put a nice seal coat on top of that asphalt, which gives it at least a quality, rich look, and then paint your lines on top of that seal coat for your parking spaces, your numbering, your accessible parking space, etc. If you want to go the next step, you're going to be in the concrete world of driveways. Concrete world has a lot of different finishes going these days, and you can pour concrete that doesn't even look like concrete. It looks like slate, and it looks like all kinds of beautiful patterns. Colored concrete can really change the overall richness and look of a place. So that's an option. Really upscale the thing with some colored concrete. Patterned concrete looks pretty nice. You can also use, in certain parts of the country, brick pavers that lay on a sand bed, kind of lined with almost like an outer border of concrete, but then the whole thing is graded in sand and then brick pavers, the whole driveway made out of brick pavers. Not a lot more expensive than just regular concrete pour, but gives it a real rich look and flavor. The world of concrete provides for a lot of different types of finishes to the concrete too. We can have exposed aggregate finish. We can have a brushed finish. You're just going to have to look at your options there. But my take on this again is that there's a fairly good size price difference between asphalt and the world of all your options in concrete and pavers. But I feel that if your actual driveway is of minimal size, that it's money well spent. Now, sure, if you're paving a huge parking lot with 20 exterior parking spaces, you're probably going to end up going asphalt. But if it's a small little driveway that feeds down to an underground parking garage, let's spend some money on that driveway. Because, again, it kind of falls into the primacy effect. The first thing you see as you pull up, if it looks rich in quality, you've got interested people. These are some of our options there. Be sure, no matter what you do in the concrete world, that you put lots of steel, lots of mesh, lots of expansion joints in your concrete, and just make sure that the base that concrete's poured on is just really compacted and bulletproof. Okay, that's how you avoid big cracks and stuff in the concrete. Also, if at all possible, pouring that concrete in a real dry section of the year is really pretty important too. Asphalt, not so important. Doesn't really matter. They'll grade it. They'll lay 2 inches of rock. They'll compact the hell out of it with rollers. And then here comes your asphalt. And hell, I've watched them do it in the rain. Doesn't seem to even matter. Concrete, a whole different deal. We've really got to prep things correctly and do it in good conditions to get the overall finish that we're looking for. Now, I've talked about a few basic principles of physics that we just can't get around. And one of those basic principles is this law of gravity. When it comes to your drain systems, your sewer systems, we're going to try to have gravity flow, of course, from point A, which is our building, to point B, which is the main hookup lines. Sometimes that's not going to be an easy task. And so there are certain occasions where we're going to have sump pump or grinding pump systems put into our drainage retention and our drain line systems and in our sewer line systems. Now, it's not ideal. I have to tell you that right out of the chute, that any time you are depending on mechanical pumps to haul rainwater away, groundwater away, or sewage away, you can see the problem. The problem is what happens if the power goes out or what happens if a pump fails. If you are depending on those systems doing their job correctly, you certainly will want to have a dual pump system so that if one pump goes out, it automatically goes to the next pump. And you're certainly going to want to have a backup generator system so that if the main power goes out, the generator automatically kicks on to provide power to those pumps during the interim. Now, you can see already why gravity is a pretty damn big deal, because what I just described there can be a very expensive proposition. I mean, sewer pumps, grinders, and generator systems don't come cheap, right? So, again, if you have to depend on those things, you definitely need those systems. Now, in the world and under the heading of alternate systems, one thing that you can do that really is very simple to do that doesn't really create an entirely different system, but it does make hooking up to alternate systems easy. Let's just say that in a normal unit or a normal house, you want to provide for an alternate power system should the power go out. What you can do, and it's very simple, is you can hook in a power cord that goes into your main 200 amp panel that hooks right into the main bus bar in the middle of the panel that is on a separate breaker, meaning that you can turn the power from the incoming main feed line, you can turn it off to the main normal feed line and on to your plug, essentially, that comes out of that panel. And then that plug is set up to plug directly into a generator. So what you're doing is you're switching the main power supply to the panel box from the street power, the vault or the main power supply to the street, to an alternate independent power system, namely a generator. To have that main plug hooked up so that it's very easy to just plug into a generator, start the generator, and then everything electrically in your house works is really easy to do when you're putting in the main electric panel. It requires another breaker and a flip system, flips where the incoming line is being fed from, and it simply is a cord then that hangs out and has a male plug that plugs into a generator system. Certain things that you'll build actually will require that. Most residential construction doesn't. And yet it's one of those things that certainly in the world of Oz, you would want to have the ability to have your main power supply powered by an exterior generator very simply. I want to take a few minutes and talk to you about the energy of the job site. Wow, what the hell do I mean about that? What I'm talking about when I talk about the energy of the job site is having a job site where everybody is working up to the level of their abilities, where subcontractors are meshing and working well together, and your role and your superintendent's role are in sync to really keep a harmony and a progress at the job site that truly has momentum and stays all the way through the end of the job. How do you do that? Okay? Well, I'm going to give you a few tips, things that I've learned along the way. One, every part of the industry is made up of hard-working guys and gals. They work for their money. They trade hours for dollars. And they trade their hands and what they know in their head for money at the end of the day. Step one is make sure you understand your audience so that when they work and they want to be paid at the end of a week or the end of the month, you better damn well pay them and pay them on time. The sure way to get unrest on a job site immediately is to not pay people on time. Okay? The second thing is they will mirror your attitude around the job. If you're positive, if you're organized, if you are a can-do person, and when I say you, I mean you or your representative, your on-site representative. If you're not going to be the one on-site day in and day out, if you're hiring that out, it is critical that your superintendent has a helpful, positive, get in the ditch, work hard attitude. If he's sitting in a job shack, standing back, saying that's not my job, and just barking orders left and right, these guys don't like that. What they do like is somebody willing to dive in and help them be successful with this project. In other words, your superintendent or you, if you're on site, has to have the attitude of, I'm here to help you. How can I help you be successful in this? If you see something they're doing that isn't what you want them to do, you've got to couch it in such a way to set up your criticism with a positive comment up front. Gosh, Jake, what you're doing here is real awesome. What do you think about doing this particular section in just a slightly different way? Make it be their idea. All of what we talk about in negotiation needs to be in full fashion on the job site. But I can tell you that you better be looking at these people eye to eye. You better be dressed in your jeans, your Red Wing work boots, and a used Carhartt. Don't be bringing on some brand new Carhartt or, you'll just show that you're as green as a fir tree. You've got to look the part, and they will respect that. I could tell you a story that I will never forget. I'm building a 12-unit apartment condominium. I'm the first guy on the job site, and I'm the last one to leave, always. And I'm on the job site late in the afternoon, and the only one still there on the job site is the laborer who works for the plumber. Now, plumbers make a hell of a mess with shavings, right? They take a speed bit and start drilling 2 and 3 inch holes through studs everywhere, and they just make a mess. I mean, there's shavings everywhere. And so the plumbers have left for the day, but they left the labor to clean up the mess. And so I'm the last one to leave, and I don't stand around and just watch the job site. There's always something to do. So I'm starting at one end of this 12-unit complex, and I'm going to sweep the entire complex down. And of course, at a certain point of this sweeping exercise, I come across this laborer who is working for the plumber. And he looks at me and he says, wouldn't you know, it's us kind of guys, the hardest working guys and the least paid on the job site. And we're the last ones working at the end of the day, sweeping up. What a bitch it is. And I looked at him. I didn't say anything, but I just kind of shook my head like I understood. And he goes, you know what kills me about this industry? Is that the guys that make all the money are driving around in their Cadillacs. They're probably at some golf club right now, sipping on a beer. And you and I, who provide the actual work on the job site, get paid so little and work so damn hard. And I said, I agree that you and I are here and that we're working hard. What I disagree with is your concept around who the owner of this job site is and the GC, the general contractor on this job site, because I think you're stereotyping all contractors into one heading. He goes, no, it's straight across the board. It's everyone you see. They never show up. All they do is sit in their ivory quiet place and bark out orders from a distance to their superintendents and who ride their subs like a $2 pony, and they make all the money. I said, well, I'd like to introduce myself to you. I said, this job is owned by a builder. Do you know the builder's name? And he said, yeah, I know the builder. It's that Pinio guy. I said, have you ever met him? He says, nope, never met him. But I know he owns a lot of buildings. And I stuck out my hand and I said, my name is Greg Pinio. And you're right, I own a lot of buildings. And I'm the first guy here in the morning, and I'm the last guy to leave. And I'm the owner. And I'm the general contractor on a broom just like you. So what do you have to say to that? Boy, you talk about stopping a guy right in his tracks. That guy became my best friend. That guy was there early in the morning. That guy was the last one to leave. He was going to prove to me that he had what it took to be an owner of a building someday, to be a general contractor. And every time he'd see me work and he'd go, hey, Greg, what can I do to help? Can I help you? Can I grab it into that? He was out now to impress me because I was working hard just like him. Contractors are hard-working guys and gals. And if they see you know how to use the tools, you are on site, you are willing to dive in, you're going to create a camaraderie around that job site. Just a few weeks ago, I was on a job site of mine on a Saturday. My main crew wasn't there. They worked Monday through Fridays. But one of the welders had to drop something off to the job site on a Saturday. He did it on his own time, and when he showed up at the job site, there I was cleaning up the job site, cleaning up the mess around the job site, picking up all the scraps and crap around the outside, sweeping the deck down. And you could tell that he was just so impressed that the guy that's building this multi-million-dollar project is here on Saturdays cleaning up a mess. That by day I might be out traveling or teaching or doing some high-level negotiations in his mind, but you know what? I haven't lost the common touch. I can still relate to these guys. And there I am in my Carhartt and my Red Wings. And he shows up and I said, hey, Gary, how are you doing? What are you doing here on a Saturday? And he looks at me and goes, what are you doing here on a Saturday? I said, hey, just trying to get a little real work in, pal. Real work like you do every day. That's what I'm trying to do. And he goes, man, you don't have to be here, but I love to see you here. And I said, well, you don't have to be here either. You've got a lot of choices, but I love the fact that you're working here too. You see, it's eye-to-eye stuff. You've got to be on the level with these guys. The minute you talk down to one of them, believe me, it'll spread across that job site like wildfire, and you'll never get anybody to work for you. But when you appreciate and respect what they do and how they do it, they will rise to the occasion, and they'll pull out every trick they ever learned. Their quality will improve. Their punctuality will improve. And more than that, the overall momentum and attitude around the job site will improve as you relate to these guys on that very core way. Now, again, if you're not on the job site day in and day out, your superintendent has to be able to speak and act the language of construction. Okay? I want you to make a transition at some point that as you grow in this and as your experience builds in this, you'll appreciate these guys. You'll learn. You'll show up and you'll really get to know them. But initially, if this is all foreign language to you, you're going to find that one guy, that superintendent, that does know the language, that is honest, that's able to carry out this project. And you'll provide that secondary row of support and financing and overall management of him. But there's got to be somebody on site that knows construction speak and knows how to relate to these guys. How do you speak that language? You don't bring these guys, high-end beer, at the end of their project. You bring them beer with animals on the can, right? And if you can't have a beer like that with these guys, you're not one of them, right? One of the most flattering things you can do to a guy that's running heavy equipment is to be the guy in the ditch working in front of the equipment. Because what it does, without saying one word, is it says, I trust you in your ability on that backhoe or track hoe to not knock me sideways or bury me in this ditch. And you can get a lot of immediate headway in the dirt stage of this project to show up, meaning you or your superintendent, to that as he's cutting a hole in and checking grade and things, that you jump right in the ditch in front of him and measure something. And then tell him, dig a little bit more right here. Come on, a little more. And he sets that huge bucket down right by your feet and takes a scoop, and you don't even flinch. What that says without saying any words is, you're my guy, you know what the hell you're doing, and I trust you. This is what I mean by creating a momentum on the job site that creates an attitude of cooperation. These guys need to know that they're appreciated. Because I got to tell you, there isn't a guy in the trades that ever makes a ton of money, right? There just isn't. I don't care if they're charging you $60-70 an hour. They're not making a ton. They work hard primarily for the appreciation they get from people that look at their work and go, wow, what a great job you did. That is their reward. That is their primary reward. And I'm telling you that how you get them to do their best work is to speak that kind of appreciation into them right up front. They will come to play their best game if you let them know that, boy, you've heard the stories. You've heard how great a work they do, and you can't wait to see what a great job they're about to do. You see? It's all speak what you want, follow through. Now, there's going to be the hard times where you're going to have to take a guy and say, hey, you're not doing it right. You're not performing. You're late. You're this, you're that. You're going to have to call people on the carpet. But more often than not, you'll go through those guys very quickly and you will get a team together. And once you've got a team together, God, you just have to treat them really well. Because these guys are your bread and butter. I think over a period of a decade, I think of all the buildings I built, and it was the same subcontractors building after building after building after building. The same ones. Built, sided, plumbed, wired, roofed. My gosh, every single building I ever built was done by 10 guys. So how much do you have to appreciate those guys? Because I know what they got paid. But boy, I got to tell you, I got paid 10 times more than all 10 of them put together. So let's appreciate their hard work. The point I'm trying to make is that the synergy of this job site is up to you. These hard-working subcontractors, these hard-working craftsmen on this job site need to be appreciated, They need to be paid on time. They need to know that in the overall scheme of what your life's about, that these people are very important to you. And creating that synergy is up to you. Now, I recognize that there are many of you out there that aren't going to rush out, buy a Carhartt Red Wings and jump in the ditch. It would look silly. You'd be completely out of place. But when I say it's up to you to create this, what I mean by that is that you've got to make sure that the synergy of that job site is connected and moving in the direction that you want it moving. The way you may achieve this is by hiring an on-site superintendent who really has a great attitude, a real positive attitude, who relates well with all the subcontractors. And you then are going to kind of mesh in to the overall system. He or she running that job site, and I mean that literally, he or she running that job site is sort of your entry pass into the world of construction. What you don't want to do is to be the Cadillac driving money man that sits out here expecting to have any influence or input to the crew on the job site. If you separate yourself in that way, you'll get no respect and you'll have no connection with the people actually working on your project. So if you don't know the language, allow yourself the time frame to almost essentially buy yourself a guide for the tour. Right? Get a superintendent there that can mesh you into getting to know the people, getting to know the subs, getting to understand what they do. Subcontractors love it when somebody who doesn't know the trade just stands there and says, "Do you mind if I watch how you do what you do? It's amazing to me how you keep track of all these wires," or "It's amazing to me how you work so quickly and efficiently. I'd just love to watch it, do what you do for a few minutes and increase my own understanding about the process of drywall taping or electrical work or plumbing or framing or what have you." They appreciate it. It's almost like showing up at a kid's ball game and watching them play. The kid really tries to play his best when someone's there appreciating his talent. And so this is really critical. And if you think about it, it comes back to just how do we treat people? Who's your audience? Knowing this audience, knowing how they're wired, what they think, that they work much harder for appreciation than they do for money. This is your audience, and when you can tap into that, you're going to get optimum performance out of this crew, and you'll have a much more enjoyable time running a job site when you've got everybody working together.